the topic of the next retreat came up, and as I meditated on it, I recognized that the theme wasn't exactly accurate for this moment where we are in the, let's say, the collapse of the social order of history, or at least its ultimate dénouement, the revelation of its true nature, and the return of God consciousness to the world. So we're in that moment of transition, and the darkest hour is always just before the dawn. And the hour, I think, for most is getting very dark. So I saw on the little bit of news that I still look at that many countries in the West, especially throughout Europe, are disseminating to all their citizens booklets to prepare for war. Now, to prepare for war, in the context of the current state of thermonuclear arsenals, doesn't mean prepare to send your sons to a distant battlefront. It means prepare to be at ground zero because a nuke is coming your way. Prepare for death. That's the meaning of these booklets that are being sent out. Prepare for death. So then I thought today the least I can do is help the governments by also helping preparing people for death. You know, we should be patriotic and, join in that service. But those booklets didn't really include, as far as I know, the psycho-spiritual dimensions of facing death or trying to run from it. But I don't think running from death is usually a very successful venture. Does everyone remember that old Sufi story of the appointment in Samara, right? Where the man is, I think he's in Baghdad or somewhere, and he's going through the market and he sees death walking, and death sees him and recognizes him, and the man gasps and death gasps, and the man immediately runs. He goes as far away as he can to this town in another part of Iraq, Samara, and in the afternoon he's kind of walking through this strange town, and there he encounters death, and now he can't run, and death says, "I was shocked to see you in Baghdad this morning because I knew we had this appointment in Samara this afternoon." So you probably have all heard that many times, but nonetheless, it's worth retelling. They had a great sense of humor about death back in those Sufi heydays. So a working title that I'm considering for the retreat, although it's not finalized, and everything can change in a moment here, but it's Prepping for the Apocalypse, or the Eschaton. And I don't think people prepare that well for the eschaton. Most people at best or worst, they prepare for a death that could be followed by the survival of offspring, for example, and of lineages, and of, let's say, histories of nations that would survive the war, right? Like some nations did and some did not survive World War I and World War II. They were eliminated. But what happens when that's a cosmic annihilation that could be faced? And so there's we're living in a time of a rupture of what I think most beings have always taken for granted, which is the going on being of the world. We'll muddle through somehow, we'll survive, and everything will be fine. And yet every day we see actually the tension rising. Australia now committed to war with China when this thing goes off, and maybe nukes even in Venezuela and elsewhere in that hemisphere, and the general increase of cataclysms at every level, of course, including Mother Nature herself, with the increasing threats of supervolcanic eruptions and the tsunamis, the earthquakes, and et cetera, so we don't have to list all of the perfect storm of catastrophes that seem all primed to go off at once, and they may. But the real question is, have we faced what we came here in life to do? Have we fulfilled whatever was the mission that God gave us to attain in this life? Can we go back and face God and say, mission accomplished, my Lord? Now, many people would think that's a fantasy and, the religious opium of the people, but I'm not sure opium is the proper word for that one. I think it's a very different confrontation, not only with the void, with the total emptiness, but with the truth and with the responsibility to love and to serve. And not just serve the ego and its jouissance, or its loyalty to its attachments, or the mere human level of existence, but not live at the level of the soul and the divine life we are intended to lead. As beings who have been saved because we have converted in our attitudes and turned to God and accepted the privilege, the honor, and the burden of responsibility of being a carrier of the light. And therefore living without complaint and without fear or anger or despair or any of those human affects that create suffering for oneself and others and put a kind of sense of guilt and failure into the morphogenic field. We don't want to stain the field. We want to transmit the light of love and salvation into the field. And that has to come from having gone through that process. So somehow I think we can say that in general, a human being is a process, but a kind of process that processes its own process. And the act of processing your own life, in other words, of looking back upon it, looking in upon it, looking honestly at its underside, its subconscious and its investments that are conscious but that are not not looked upon objectively, not evaluated from a perspective of the divine compass of whether our attitudes are accurate in the alignment with the will of God. Because what else are we talking about except alignment with the will that has to be felt in the heart? It's not something that can be formulated symbolically, but must be felt with such power that no words can describe. What is revealed. And so, as Sri Ramana always says, the result of God realization is that you have a dead mind. Mind in the sense of small m, ego mind. But that dead mind means that there has been an ascension beyond the ego to the fundamental source of that mind, which is infinite mind, infinite creative intelligence. So it's not a loss of the capacity to know, it's an exponential augmentation into the capacity for the supreme knowledge in which everything else is revealed as illusion. So, to prepare for death is to prepare for eternal life. But it's also to prepare to completely disappear as everything you thought you were. And then you have a dead mind. But you have a consciousness that has come alive into the infinite imagination of the deathless self. But the price of being deathless is also being lifeless. And that's what holds the ego back.